Hello, everyone, and welcome to Slash Film Daily for February 20th, 2018. On today's show, we're going to be talking about a handful of news items, including the trailer to Darren Brown's Push, a new Netflix reality movie, docudrama, whatever you want to call it. We'll talk about it. Also, Jessica Chastain has been cast in the It sequel, and Black Panther has been destroying the box office, literally. Not literally. Figuratively? Figuratively.
Yes.
Yes. Yes, in our feature presentation, we're going to be talking all about Black Panther. So if you have seen the movie, like many people out there have, we're going to be talking about how does Black Panther set up the future of the Marvel Cinematic Universe? What does it mean for this universe? Joining me on today's podcast is Slash Film Weekend Editor, Brad Oman.
Hey, that's me.
Senior Writer, Ben Pearson.
Hey, what's going on?
And writer Chris Evangelista.
Hello.
And this is, as always, Slash Film Editor-in-Chief, Peter Sciretta. Let's just jump into the news. First off, this trailer from Netflix for a TV special, TV movie, I don't know what you want to call it, reality movie. I know that they, in 2003, MTV released this reality movie called The Real Cancun, which was a spectacular disaster of sorts. So I don't know what you'd call this, but it seems interesting. So Ben, tell us about it.
Yeah, it's I guess just a reality special, maybe, is what we'll call it. And it's called The Push, and it hails from a psychological illusionist from the UK named Darren Brown, who is apparently one of the world's greatest mentalists. And he has been making shows in the UK for a number of years, and he's popular in America as well, but this is his first big American special. So instead of, it's like a hidden camera thing, but instead of doing something stupid to a celebrity, like trying to trick Justin Timberlake into thinking that all of his assets are being seized by the government, this show is about trying to convince somebody to murder someone. So they really they crank this thing up to 11 pretty quickly. The trailer is pretty nuts. It's all just like a completely straight-faced setup for literally trying to convince somebody to kill someone. There's like a 70-person team of actors who create this entire scenario that spins further and further out of control with one unsuspecting subject who has no idea that they're involved in any of this, and they're just like watching their world spin out of control right around them. And I guess the end game of the experiment is to see if they would actually push somebody off of a huge ledge and kill them. And it's all about, it reminds me a lot of the movie Compliance that came out back in 2012. It's just like a psychological experiment to see how far a normal person would go in the face of, societal pressures and authority and stuff like that. So yeah, this looks pretty crazy.
Yeah, Darren Brown, this is the first time Darren Brown has done something like this. And in the UK, a few years back, he had this special called Apocalypse, where he it's actually very interesting. If you have not seen this, it's available to watch for free on Darren Brown's YouTube page. And it's this 2-episode special where he basically was casting his own a new show in the UK, and he basically had all these people come in for auditions, and when they auditioned, they signed this like long form basically giving up all rights to any footage they captured of them, which basically meant that these people thought that they didn't get the gig, and one of these guys through hypnosis, I'm not sure if it's real or not, but basically wakes up during a zombie apocalypse. And through hidden cameras, basically, we followed this guy for like 30 minutes, trying to survive in insane situations, like truly insane situations. Like it is like, yeah, a reality movie. I'm interested to see more of this because I think it's insane. Like if one thing went wrong, if the guy realized what was happening, the whole it's a house of cards that would completely fall apart.
Right.
So I'm wondering if they did this to multiple people to come up with this this special or this movie, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
Brad, do you have any thoughts on this?
I haven't seen any of this guy's stuff, but I've always like every now and then I've thought of ideas where like it would be interesting to see how people would genuinely react in situations that seem like there would be no way to actually fake it and get someone's real reaction or decision in like very unique scenarios like this. So I'm kind of fascinated to see what this is and how real it is, because it seems like a fascinating concept. It seems very obviously deceptive and potentially traumatic, but I don't know. I'm very intrigued by this.
Chris, any thoughts on this?
I don't know. Maybe I'm too much of a nerd or something, but I feel like this is like needlessly cruel. Like, I don't know. If someone played a trick like this on me, like, and then at the end they were like, it was all a trick, I'd be furious. I'd be like, what the hell is wrong with you? Like, why would you put someone through this? But I don't know, maybe that's me.
Well,
and again,
well, we should say, I don't know about this one, but the one for Apocalypse, they were casting like a reality series that would push people, you know, to face their fears and to the limit. Like, so basically all the people were signing up for the thing that, you know, the guy that actually went through it, he knew, or he wanted something, you know, probably not that experience.
This doesn't really look like that. This looks more like this person just happens to get a job working at like a fancy event, and then a guy fakes a heart attack, and then I mean, the whole thing is really, really crazy. But Chris, just for the record, I'm right there with you. I feel like these experiments have been conducted before, and like we've learned about the societal implications of all this. So doing it again just does really seem needlessly cruel.
I don't know. I want to see this. If you have not seen Darren Brown do any of his stuff, I'm not a big person that likes you know, I love magic. I don't really love mentalism and hypnotism, but like he does some great stuff. He has I think a special from like 10 years ago called Svengali, which is available to watch on YouTube, and I think that's like recorded live on stage. It's pretty good, so I'd recommend checking that out. And also, I'll link in the show notes the Apocalypse thing that I was talking about. You know, it is like, you know, putting a guy inside The Walking Dead. It's crazy. Like, how would you react if you actually thought the world was being overcome by zombies? It's nuts. But let's move on to something a little bit more obvious, and that is we finally have word that Jessica Chastain is in talks for the It sequel. Chris, what do we know?
Yeah, so pretty much ever since the first It came out last year in 2017, people have been basically fan casting Jessica Chastain in the role of the adult version of the character of Bev. I mean, she has already worked with the director on the film Mama, so they have a history together. And in past, people have actually asked her, you know, would you be interested in being in the film? And she's all said, yes, I would. So now it's been confirmed that she is officially, finally in talks to take on the role. I mean, she hasn't taken it yet, but it's a good sign that it'll probably happen if everything works out according to plan. And so the film is due out September 6th, 2019, which means they're going to have to start shooting it sooner rather than later. So I'm sure we'll get a confirmation on her casting and the rest of the adult casting as we go further along.
Ben, is this shocking at all?
No, not in the least. But it's great news because Chastain is a fantastic actress, and the idea of her reuniting for this movie also sort of sets a high bar for the rest of the cast. And I know we did like a big feature last year when It Chapter 1 came out, where we had a bunch of sort of pie in the sky picks and then also like more realistic choices. But I'm wondering if Chastain is involved, if that means that they're going to be able to bring in some other, people who are on her level and not necessarily have to quote unquote settle for, some of the lower actors that we might have chosen for our list.
That is a good question, and we should be finding out this news soon as casting is ramping up. But let's move on to Black Panther. Before we get into spoilers, let's talk about the box office, because Black Panther, did enormous box office numbers, surprising even Disney. Brad, tell us about it.
Yeah, so initially, Black Panther's projections leading up to its opening weekend, they were big, but no one was expecting them to be as big as they ended up being. The projections the week leading up to the release were around 165. As the opening got closer, they were moved up to around 180. Then once the Thursday night preview screenings happened and Friday took off, the number just kept getting higher. Even as of Sunday, it looked they had, Disney had their early estimates in, and it still looked like that the numbers by the end of President's Day weekend might climb higher, and sure enough, they did. So the ultimate 3-day haul for Black Panther's opening weekend was $201.8 million. That's the 5th largest domestic opening of all time. It's the second highest superhero opening behind the Avengers from 2012. And then as for the 4-day President's Day weekend, it actually made $242 million, which shattered the February release record, shattered Deadpool's previously set President's Day weekend record, and it's just a huge...
It shattered Justice League's whole domestic take, right?
Yeah, in 4 days, it earned more than Justice League did in its entire domestic theatrical run, which is just insane, for success for any movie, but also just a real bummer for Warner Brothers.
Like, people are probably getting fired, I'm sure, as we speak.
Yeah, this is, it's a huge movie. It'll be interesting to see if it has the kind of legs that Wonder Woman did. My gut tells me that it probably will. There'll definitely be a big drop in the second weekend, as there are with all blockbusters that open this big. But I think this movie is going to get really go the distance. And yeah, Marvel obviously has another huge hit on their hands, and it's clear that audiences want diversity in their movies, especially blockbusters. And Hollywood can't make the argument anymore that predominantly black casts don't pull in audiences at the box office anymore. This movie completely goes against all expectations and myths that Hollywood has perpetuated for years.
Well, before we get into spoilers, you do bring up a good point. Like, does this mean, because we're going to be talking about what does Black Panther mean for the future of the MCU, and I'm wondering, Brad, you cover the superhero beat and superhero bits on the site. Do you think that this is going to mean we're going to see more black heroes on screen in the MCU?
Yeah, for sure. I think this is proof that audiences are hungry for it, and the black population has been looking for representation on the superhero side of things for years, especially on the big screen. We're starting to see the superhero genre expand into being much more diverse, and Hollywood is also doing the same thing, and that's good all around for sure. And I think this means we'll likely see some more of Marvel's black superheroes maybe get a more prominent role, or we'll start to see superheroes that we haven't seen on the big screen yet, or at least expanded roles for heroes that we haven't seen in a while. Marvel has the rights to Blade again, so either he'll get a new film franchise, or he'll get his own series on Marvel. War Machine has been in the MCU for a while, so maybe he'll.
I feel like I was gonna say, I feel like War Machine and Falcon have kind of gotten the shaft. They're kind of like the sidekick guys. Do you think now that this happened that they might actually get a feature film?
The one that I think has a really good chance of a big future in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, is Falcon. But that also depends on what Marvel's plan is for Captain America, because we know that a lot of the core Avengers members are going to be sidelined once the next phase of Marvel Cinematic Universe kicks off. We're going to basically see a new lineup of heroes instead of Iron Man and Hulk and Captain America and Thor. So in the comics, Falcon becomes Captain America. So it would stand to reason that we would see Anthony Mackie as Sam Wilson taking on the mantle of Captain America. At the same time, Bucky Barnes is also another character who has taken on the mantle of Captain America as well. So it's a toss-up as to if we really say goodbye to Steve Rogers, whether it's because he maybe dies or just decides to retire or whatever, that maybe one of those characters will step up to become the new Captain America. Considering the credit scene from the end of Black Panther, there's a bit of a hint as to which way they might go. Can we get into that at all, or is that too spoilery for now?
You know what? Okay, let's get into spoilers now. So if you have not seen Black Panther, you want to turn this off and not listen until you've seen the movie. And if you haven't seen the movie, what are you doing with yourself? Go see the movie. Okay, we're going to get into spoilers. Go ahead.
So the final credit scene in Black Panther takes place in Wakanda, and it sees Shuri having a scene with Bucky Barnes, and he still doesn't have his metal arm that he used to have, and it's clearly he's been recovering, and Shuri's been doing something with him, whether it's training or helping get rid of the brainwashing that was done to him in the past, but she's been working with him somehow. What's interesting is that the kids who are nearby this hut that he's been staying in refer to him as White Wolf. And that could easily maybe just be some kind of Easter egg or something like that, but White Wolf is a character in Marvel Comics, and it would stand to reason that maybe Bucky Barnes could take on the mantle of White Wolf, and that could be his route in the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
And that would leave Captain America for Falcon, right?
Exactly.
Interesting. Another thing I want to talk about, there's this Photoshop going around that from a guy named Boss Logic on Twitter. I'll put it in the show notes, and it shows Shuri as Ironheart. Ironheart being the replacement for Iron Man in the comics was a young black woman, right? And they called her Ironheart. Is that how it goes, Brad?
Yeah, her name's Riri Williams, and I believe she's like an MIT student, and she's always looked up to Stark, and she takes on the mantle of Iron Man, and her name is Ironheart.
So would you like to see Shuri become the next Iron Man?
Yeah, I mean, and this kind of goes along with what it seems like the Marvel Cinematic Universe has planned for its future as well, because if Iron Man's also stepping aside, maybe they need someone to take on the mantle of Iron Man as well. And while Shuri has become Black Panther in the comics, it doesn't seem like Black Panther's really going to go anywhere anytime soon, since his franchise is just getting kicked off, and I can't imagine Marvel trying to kick Chadwick Boseman out of the Black Panther suit so quickly. So, if anything, this would be the perfect opportunity to set Shuri up as a replacement for Tony Stark, and she can become, her own superhero as well. I think that would be a cool thing to do, especially because Shuri has shown she is every bit as brilliant as Tony Stark with what she can do with technology.
Okay, we don't know what's going to happen in Infinity War and Avengers 4, but we kind of get the idea that there's going to be some big stakes, there's going to be some big deaths. We know Captain America, Thor, and Tony Stark, those actors' contracts are kind of up. We don't know what their future is in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and it's being speculated that there might be a lot of loss in this Infinity War. So I'm wondering, with that happening, does this leave Black Panther and maybe Doctor Strange as the new face of the MCU? Chris, what do you think?
I don't know. I mean, it could happen. I mean, Black Panther is such a huge hit. I could definitely see that happening now. If you had asked me a year ago, I would be unsure. But yeah, that could definitely happen. And, I think there's like a knee-jerk reaction against that to be like, oh, they're not as well known. But the Marvel characters everyone loves now were not as quote unquote well known by movie audiences when they first launched, and look at them now. So it's definitely a possibility.
Yeah, and Captain Marvel. So I feel like this lineup is gonna the Phase 4 lineup is gonna look completely different.
I would also throw in Ant-Man and the Wasp in there as well, especially with Evangeline Lilly's Hope Van Dyne getting an increased role in the MCU. I would not be surprised to see her take a larger role in these movies going forward. Maybe even crossing over into some of the other films. Sort of how Iron Man was in Spider-Man: Homecoming, that kind of thing.
One person I wanted to talk about when seeing this film, and we're not going to do like a review of Black Panther here. You can read that on the site. You can go to the /filmcast. They have a long episode delving into the review. We're just talking about how this film impacts the future of the MCU. And while I was watching Black Panther, I was interested that they revealed that Martin Freeman's character Everett K. Ross was an Air Force pilot in his past. And when they first brought that up, I'm like, oh my God, they're setting up, him to be in Captain Marvel, which takes place in the 1990s and in the Air Force. But later in the film, it came to, it came to pay off in the climactic battle of the film. So I'm wondering, Ben, do you think this is setting up Ross for a role in Captain Marvel?
I was thinking the same thing, yeah. And I think because that movie takes place in the 90s and there aren't really that many opportunities for crossover potential at that point on the timeline. I mean, we know that Samuel L. Jackson is going to have both eyes in the movie as Nick Fury. But really, beyond that, I'm not sure what other MCU characters you could pull in that would make sense with the story that, I guess we don't fully know what story they're telling exactly in the Captain Marvel movie, but based on the comics and sort of everything that we can infer about it so far, it doesn't really make too much sense to pull in many of the other characters from the MCU, except somebody like Ross, who they might need to recast, or maybe they could just sort of age Martin Freeman down just a little bit. But yeah, seeing him in his sort of earlier days would make a ton of sense. So I was thinking the same thing when I was sitting there in the theater.
And when I was talking to Slash Film managing editor Jacob Hall about this, he wondered if Ross is the new Agent Coulson. Chris, what do you think about that?
Oh, I don't know. That could happen. Yeah, I mean, I really don't know. That seems. I personally, I would like it if the Marvel movies started doing things differently instead of just fitting characters into already established sort of roles. But that maybe that's me. But anything is possible with this franchise. They're making it up as it go. They can always do that if they want to. Okay,
so one thing coming out of Black Panther, I was thinking about the future of the MCU, and I was thinking about now that the whole world has Wakanda's overpowered tech, what does this mean for stakes in the MCU in Infinity War? Like now that the whole world can basically heal someone at a state of they should be dead. How does that change this world? Brad, do you have any thoughts on this?
Part of me wonders if the next phase of the Marvel Cinematic Universe may flash forward a bit after the events of Infinity War. As it stands, it's basically been present day, for as far as when these movies are taking place. Like they're taking place in essentially what would be our world. A little bit more advanced technology, but that's common for movies like this, that superhero movies or sci-fi movies. And I think it would be interesting if, with this introduction of Wakanda's technology and their use of vibranium and all how versatile of a substance it is, if we flash forward a bit to a bit more of a futuristic Earth, and where this technology has been spread more so across the world, and we're looking at a place maybe where other superheroes, like in the way that Iron Man is now established as a superhero, and Spider-Man and whatnot, maybe heroes like Black Panther and others like Captain Marvel are already a little bit more established, so that way we don't have to worry too much about other origin stories for other superheroes. I don't know. That's just me spitballing kind of off the top of my head.
Yeah.
But I think it would be interesting to see a flash forward to a time in the future in the MCU.
But I guess what I'm wondering is, I love the sentiment that what they do, but with giving the tech to the world and not being selfish with it, and what Ryan Coogler is trying to say with that. But I'm wondering if this basically breaks the universe. Do you know what I mean? Like, does this give everybody tech that... Ben, what are your thoughts on this?
I think just because Wakanda decides at the end of the movie to share this technology with the rest of the world, I don't necessarily think that means that they have decided to give the world all every piece of vibranium that they have, and I think there's still going to be some measure of control in sort of divvying out that technology. So I don't necessarily think, I understand what you're saying, that because this technology exists out there and because more people have access to it, yes, that does make it more likely that it can be used to reverse what would otherwise be a fatal injury for someone. But I'm just not sure the extent to which Wakanda is going to share the wealth immediately. Maybe that could be part of the conflict in a Black Panther 2. You know, somebody essentially saying that we shouldn't be, you know, the decision has been made to share this tech with the world, but maybe somebody saying, hey, we should save a little bit for us. That may be, you know, I guess retreading some of the same ground that was covered thematically in the first film. But yeah, I don't know. I didn't really immediately go to that extreme thought, Peter. But you have a point. You might be onto something there. And
I'm not sure if you can talk about this. Yesterday we played your interview with Ryan Coogler, the director and writer, and I know during that interview you were asking about this.
Yes. Yeah, I can talk about it. So I tried to ask him about the future of the MCU, like what that decision looked like. You know, if Kevin Feige had to step in and approve, you know, because it has such a potentially large impact on the future of the MCU. And his publicist, his handler, basically shut me down and said, we can't talk about anything that is spoiler related. You'll have to email me that question, and then I will sort of get it approved and get back to you if we can. And I've never had that happen before in an interview before, like in the middle of an interview. I actually had to edit that section out of the audio that I played on the podcast yesterday. But
and you never heard back ever again.
And yeah, I sent it off, and they were like, okay, yeah, we'll send it to the right people, and I just haven't heard anything back. So obviously Ryan Coogler's really busy, you know, traveling around the world, showing this movie off in all these different countries and stuff. So the last I heard was I was supposed to hear an answer back last week and just never heard anything. So I'm guessing my question didn't get approved.
Yeah. It's also interesting to note that Kevin Feige wasn't doing interviews at the junket, probably more so because of the Fox Disney deal and not wanting to, you know, talk about that or have all these questions about Infinity War at this point. But one other thing, watching this movie, the first half of this movie, and being immersed in this culture and world of Wakanda, it was just so great. And I was wondering, if I was Disney and I was creating this streaming service with, you know, they've already said they're doing Star Wars TV shows, they're going to do Marvel TV shows, I would do Wakanda, the TV series. Chris, would you watch that?
Yes, absolutely. One of the things I liked most about Black Panther was that it created this whole new world, and it sort of stood alone from the rest of the MCU. You know, nothing against the MCU already, but I liked that this was creating something. It wasn't just more of the same. It was taking this, whatever you want to call it, cinematic universe to a whole new place. So I would love to see more stories in general just in that world.
Now, on Friday, Ben, you published an article called titled "Why Black Panther Doesn't Contain Any Infinity Stones." What did we learn there?
Yeah, so in an interview with IGN, Ryan Coogler was asked if there were ever any plans to include the final Infinity Stone in Black Panther, and he said, quote, "I love the Infinity Stones as much as any comic book fan. It's just Wakanda already had its thing, which is vibranium. For us, that was special enough. So to throw in something like another special thing didn't feel right. It felt like we should stick with our one MacGuffin for the country and explore that. Let that be the important thing, because frankly, we didn't need to have another piece like that." So yeah, I think Black Panther probably already had enough on its plate with the, you know, as Chris was talking about, the whole introduction of Wakanda and really taking you to a whole new place in the Marvel Universe, and making Wakanda feel like a real lived-in place with its own history and traditions. Throwing an Infinity Stone in there is exactly the kind of thing that got Iron Man 2 in trouble. You know, it's those kinds of forced connections that I feel like bring the, you know, put unnecessary weight on individual movies within the MCU. Yeah, Peter, I know you're interested in wondering if the final Infinity Stone is actually somewhere on Wakanda. And in this article, I run down where each of the Infinity Stones are right now, and at this point in the MCU timeline. I don't think that this one is on Wakanda, because the other thing that Coogler said in that interview was that Marvel was never really interested in putting a stone in his movie either. So for me, that it seems unlikely that there would be a stone that was sitting there that would maybe emerge in Infinity War or something. My theory, such as it is that maybe one of Thanos's children or minions, one of the, what are they called, the Black Guard or something
Black
like
Order.
that, the Black Order. Maybe one of them actually brings the final stone to Thanos in the beginning of Infinity War or at some point during that movie. So I find it hard to believe that we would visit Wakanda and then in the next movie discover that an Infinity Stone has been sitting there the whole time.
Well, I'm going to actually disagree with you there, and I think that the final Infinity Stone is in Wakanda, and we just don't know about it yet. Because something like that would be something that would likely be kept extremely secret, maybe even more secret than, the vibranium supply, which everybody in Wakanda knows about. This could be one of those things where maybe like only the upper echelons of the royal family or whatever know about, especially because, and this is based on speculation from the toys that have been revealed so far, but there are a couple of Lego sets that deal with the battle on Wakanda, and one of them has one of
you're talking about for Infinity War, right?
Yes. One of them has one of Thanos' adopted children using some kind of device to break through a wall that is on Wakanda somewhere. So part of me wonders if maybe there's a research facility somewhere on Wakanda where they have the stone. Maybe they don't know what it is, and it's there, and they find out about it. Because otherwise, why is there a battle happening on Wakanda between all of those Avengers that we saw in that final shot of the trailer and the Black Order and also all those aliens? So that there has to be something there that they want, and I feel like it has to be an Infinity Stone.
Yeah, there has to be a reason of some kind. I think fans have been speculating for a long time that, Wakanda has vibranium because, maybe there is an Infinity Stone in that area that has been there for, centuries, that has, created that material that basically has allowed them to be such future tech. And that's
there's also speculation that because the final one that we haven't found yet, I believe, is the Soul Stone, that might be the reason why Wakandans have such a connection to their ancestors, and they're able to converse with them and speak with them like in the spirit world.
My theory is the Soul Stone is in the ground where we see those weird purple flowers that are ground up in Black Panther drinks to become Black Panther. That's my theory, but yes, but the Infinity Stones weren't in the movie. You wrote this article on the site. I would say a dozen people were very angry with this headline, Ben. They thought it was a spoiler. And, is a spoiler, I don't want to get sidetracked on the spoiler discussion that we keep on going back to, but is a spoiler something that isn't in the movie? Like if I'm telling you, Thanos is not in Black Panther, is that a spoiler?
I don't think that's a spoiler. I think I guess it's a fine distinction there. I think the idea that if the trailers had strongly hinted at the possibility of an Infinity Stone being in Wakanda or in this movie in any way, and then for me to have a headline that says why Black Panther doesn't contain any Infinity Stones, I guess that would be a spoiler. I think. Yeah. But maybe just as is.
I'm saying we're also not being assholes and just running that as a headline. It's Brian Coogler doing pre-press for the movie before the movie has come out, talking about why it is not in the movie. So I feel like it's fair game, and I think people in the spoiler phobic society have I think we've forgotten what a spoiler is. A spoiler is something that spoils your enjoyment of the movie or story, right? So at no time in this movie is your enjoyment spoiled by the fact that that there is not an Infinity Stone in this movie.
Yeah, I would actually argue that your enjoyment of the movie can be increased because you don't have to worry about the baggage that an Infinity Stone brings to the to this movie. You know what I mean? Like if they introduced
or the
Soul
disappointment,
Stone,
if you're like looking forward to it, you're like, it's all gonna come together. We're gonna find out the final Infinity Stone, and you go see the movie, you're disappointed.
Yeah. I mean, I obviously we think it's fine, but I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. So let's move on because we have a couple more things to get to, and that is the one thing I wanted to bring up is, and I'm wondering if any of you have connected the dots here, but the black market arms dealer Ulysses Claw smuggled large amounts of vibranium out of Wakanda and sold them on the black market. We're not told when that happened. We see the opening scene in 1992 when they kind of meet them in what was it, Brooklyn or New York? Or no, Oakland, sorry.
Oakland, yeah.
Yeah, Oakland. It got me thinking because, they did sell a lot of vibranium. Who did they sell the vibranium to? And I looked this up. Howard Stark was assassinated in December 1991. So a month or two before that opening scene of Black Panther. So I'm wondering, Brad, do you think that is how Howard Stark got the vibranium for Captain America's shield?
No, because the shield was... Well, no, I don't think that would really line up, because Claw would have to have been pretty young.
Yeah. That would have been had been much earlier.
Yeah, because that would have been in the 40s, right? So that's when Howard gave him his shield during World War II. So I don't think so. I think Claw's too young for that to be possible.
Let me redo the question then. Do you think that we're going to find out that Howard Stark fits into this whole? We have the trifecta of Bucky and Howard Stark and Captain America and all that thing. Do you think we're gonna get this to be even like more of a foursome or fivesome, and find out that Howard Stark was involved in buying illegal vibranium at some point?
Gosh, I don't know. I'm not sure what it would accomplish storytelling wise. It
might put some tension between Tony and Black Panther, right? Or no?
Yeah, I mean, I guess so, but it's I don't know. That would be interesting, but I just don't know what purpose it serves when the whole point of Infinity War is bring everybody together. Like, I guess it would create, it would make it a little bit interesting because they would have to put aside their differences to work together to fight Thanos. But I don't know what that does for each of their characters and how they relate to each other, and just creating conflict that will that is based on something that happened in the past that neither of them had any control over.
Yeah, it almost seems like it might be a little bit too much of a retread of some of the stuff that happened in Civil War, just with like a different inciting incident and maybe two different players there. With Captain America and Black Panther in this case, but
yeah. Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, we might find out that maybe there's a little bit more of a history to like the work that Howard Stark was doing, and stuff like that. But I don't think it'll be anything that'll create any sort of conflict.
Okay, I guess lastly, people are probably already wondering, what's going to happen in Black Panther 2. I'm wondering, who do you think might be the sequel for? I mean, who do you think might be the villain for the sequel? Chris, do you have any thoughts?
I don't know. It's going to be really hard to top the character of Killmonger, who is, like, without question, the best Marvel villain yet. I mean, everyone knows Marvel has had trouble with their villains in their films where they're just not that interesting. And this character, he's sort of like the first villain who has this complete arc. So I really don't know how they're going to top that, but I'm curious to see who it'll be. I don't think it'll be anyone who's already been established. I do think it's going to be someone completely new to the story, just because I can't picture any of the characters in the current film, becoming a big main villain in the sequel.
Ben, do you have any thoughts?
Maybe Daniel Kaluuya's character might, if he teams up with somebody else, I think he's the only person that I can fathom, because he turned against T'Challa so quickly in Black Panther, even though they were supposed to be really good friends. I wonder if that was just a result of some stuff being left on the cutting room floor in terms of that character's arc, or if that is maybe sort of indicative of that character's mentality and willingness to swap sides should a better opportunity present itself. So I wonder if he could be. And it certainly doesn't hurt that Daniel Kaluuya is like Oscar nominated for Get Out. So the idea of bringing him back will probably be attractive to Marvel. And giving him a beefier role might be something that I could see, a decision that I could see them making. But yeah, I'm not exactly sure. I think it's too early to speculate why any of those characters might turn against him at this point. But
yeah. Black Panther, as great as the mythology is of Wakanda and that world and those characters, he doesn't have a great rogues gallery of villains. Brad, what do you think about a villain for Black Panther 2?
One of the interesting things I read online that could be is a theory as well as just kind of just a pipe dream. But the Marvel Comics character Namor, the Submariner, could make for an interesting Black Panther 2 villain, because his character initially is kind of this anti-hero who causes destruction and kind of creates havoc before he becomes more of a hero later on. But he's got a villain history, and it would be interesting to see that come to fruition, if only because there's a little bit of an Easter egg in Iron Man 2 where there's a map that Tony Stark is looking at, and it's all spots of intrigue, and they tie to Hulk, the battle that happened on college campus in Virginia, I think that was, and then where Thor's hammer was found in New Mexico. There happens to be one in Africa that is the location of Wakanda. But then there's also one that is out in the middle of the ocean that has a lot of people thinking that it was an Easter egg reference to Namor at some point maybe being introduced. So it'd be kind of interesting to see him brought into this the stable as a villain somehow, especially because Marvel doesn't really have an aquatic superhero like DC does that they've introduced into the Marvel Cinematic Universe yet.
Okay, I think that does our discussion of Black Panther and how it will fit into the future of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I hope you enjoyed it. Brad, where can people find more of your work online?
You can find me at Ethan_Anderton on Twitter and at theslashfilm.com all the time, and listen to my podcast, Go Flix Yourself, on iTunes and other podcast places.
Ben, where can people find more of your work?
Slashfilm.com, and you can find me on Twitter at Ben Pearson.
Chris, where can we find you?
Also slashfilm.com and on Twitter at Evangelista413.
You can read more of all the stories we mentioned today and the stuff I mentioned that I was going to put in the show notes. This podcast, Slash Film Daily, is published every weekday on iTunes, Google Play, Overcast, all the popular podcast apps. Please feel free to send your feedback, questions, comments, concerns to peter@slashfilm.com. Leave your name and general geographic location in case we mention the email on there. Please go rate and review this podcast on iTunes. Help spread the word, tell your friends, and we'll see you tomorrow.